from your perspective, what goes into a successful content strategy?
Yeah. I think before we get into that, there's so many routes that you can go to in social media. There's content creation, there's social media management, there's influencer management, there's strategy. I cut my teeth in strategy. That's where I started, really because brands just didn't know how to be on social, and that was an inherently strategic project to work on. So when it comes to building strategies, I have a kind of a personal approach that I take, and I take into account three things. I take into account what is right for the brand or the team that I'm working on, what is right for the fan and what do they want, what is the truth about them that is undeniable. And oftentimes those are more generalizations, but they can be specific too. And then the third area is what makes this uniquely social or inherently right for the platform that I'm talking about, whether that be TikTok or Instagram. And if you look at the overlap of those circles, if you're thinking the three concentric circles, that overlap is really small, but when you get it right, you crush. The ideas are great. The fans are really happy, the content team's really happy, the social media person's happy, and the organization or the team that you're working for is happy. So like in a perfect world, it has to take into account all three things. Something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, especially as Gen Z is really dominating social media, is like, just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not strategically right. And that has been a hard thing to walk away from, because for so long I was the target market of so much social content, and now I'm not. And so that's been something from a strategy standpoint to really like wrap my head around is, my personal opinion and strategy, mining strategy are two different things. And I always need to make sure that I mine the strategy. So that's been my approach really my entire career. And it's held true today, because even if platforms change, that strategy still, my approach still stands strong and is true. So that is my way of thinking about it.
For sure. Well, yeah, I mean, one thing you said that just sticks with me is like, just knowing that you are not the target audience of the content that you're trying to put out, which, back when I started in NASCAR, it was like, we're trying to attract an audience that doesn't know much about NASCAR, and we're trying to make them interested. And it's like, oh, well, that's easy, because that's me. I am the target audience. I'll make content that I think is cool, and we're good. And I think that's been an evolution for me specifically too, that it's like, my team will have meetings and they'll be like, did you see that trend on TikTok? And it's like,
nope.
No. Like
I have that probably twice a day.
Yeah.
I have a meme that I sent you and I'm like, nope, no. I haven't.
And it's like, and it like, I basically am like, trust me, I have not seen any of this stuff, because like, to TikTok's credit, like the algorithm is so good that it pushes the stuff that I want to see. So it's like, dad jokes and, what was the other thing I watch now? It's like bushcraft of like people making like cabins out of like stuff. And so it's like this stuff that my team, who's 10, 12 years younger than I am, that they're seeing is so different. But it's like, that's where becoming, the leader and less of like the doer. And it's like, you lean into these young, talented people who know what they're talking about, and just, you have to take that leap of faith of just like, well, I don't understand it, but if you think it's cool, let's give it a shot and go from there.
There's a high degree of trust involved with social media. And all that's to say is like, sometimes you get it wrong, and that's okay. But when you get it right, you get it right. And that's when, there are videos that my mom has sent me and my coworkers have sent me where there's like the great equalizer content where it like is so relatable to everyone that it almost transcends target audiences. But your feed is very different than mine. Mine is predominantly golden retrievers. I don't have a golden retriever, but I must watch and send a lot of those videos, because that is what I get 95% of the time, which is hilarious.
It's so funny. That's like the new thing that I watch, aside from the guys making cabins in the woods, is like these guys who trade watches in like New York City. And I have an Apple Watch. I've never bought a really nice watch. I don't even know that I really care that much about it, but the content is so good that that's what floods my timeline now. And I end up sitting there watching it for, 10, 20, 30 minutes. And it's like I have no interest in having a Rolex. Like, why does this content matter to me? But that's that's the dream, right?
Yeah,
like that's
so strange.
That's what you want, is like, I want people, sitting on their couch scrolling through stuff to see stuff from the Pirates that, they're not interested in baseball. They don't care about the Pirates. They're not for Pittsburgh, but they're like, oh, this is good stuff. Like that's the whole goal right there.
It's the win for sure. I
Yeah.
agree. Couldn't agree more.
So one thing that I always talk about and work through is like, anytime you go home for the holidays and it's like, oh, so what do you do? Like you just sit on Instagram all day. Like that must be so nice, so easy. And it's like, well, there's a lot that goes into it. So just take us through like your process from like, here's the idea or here's what we want to do, and then all the way to now it's time to post it and see what the world thinks.
Yeah, it's twofold for me. So I'm currently managing our agency's social media channels. So as the company that is looking to represent athletes, we also have to represent ourselves and make sure that we're attracting them. And so I work with a creative team and a production team here, very small, but very scrappy, awesome team, where we're planning as far out as we can, typically a month out. And we kind of know what that cadence of content is going to look like over time. But when you work in sports and when you work with people, things will happen on a moment's notice, and you have to figure out how to turn around content in 2 hours or less, which can be very challenging, especially with a strapped team. But I'm very lucky that our team here is highly skilled, and we have kind of come up with systems and processes where that isn't a headache anymore. So that's really awesome. But every day is different. I wish I could say that, you come in and you do the same thing over and over and there's a lot of repetition, but I actually think that's why I love my job and love this industry, is because I don't fatigue of what I do. It's a different day every day. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's really exciting. Sometimes it's confusing, but there are very few industries where that's the case. If I wanted to sit behind a spreadsheet all day long, I could have chosen an industry that would allow me to do that. But I thrive on creative energy and collaboration and problem solving and finding, ways in for news. So that is why social media is so great. So the day changes, but there's a good chance, and I can look at my weekly screen time to confirm that I am scrolling feeds, not because I'm, doom scrolling or mindlessly doing something. It's because I'm looking for material to work with. I'm looking for trends that I can pitch to our athletes. I'm looking for inspiration that I can send to our designer for how we can talk about a new athlete signing. So social media is, in my opinion, like the world's greatest focus group. There's so much content out there that you can draw inspiration from, and pass along that can serve as inspiration. So I'm on it all the time. Sometimes it looks like I'm not paying attention in meetings, but I promise I am. But yeah, the question always comes up with family, like, what do you actually do? And in the context of sports, they started to get it. But it is fun to say, like, yeah, I do get to be on the internet all day long, and I actually get to create the things that you see and that you share with your friends and family and your coworkers. And so that's really cool to be able to say that.
Yeah. And that's like I've always said, like the blessing and the curse of our industry is no 2 days are the same. And it's like, it keeps things fresh, but you always have to be learning and ahead of the game. And it's definitely, it's challenging, and but that's the fun. It's the same thing I talk about.
I think the hardest part when you're deciding in social media what industry you want to work in is deciding whether or not you want to go brand side, if you want to go corporate, if you want to work for a team. What's really unique about sports, and something that I think attracts a lot of people to sports, is that it is one of the few industries that people still seek out. When you think about advertising, it's very much push messaging. It's like, I want you to do this, buy this, think about this. Whereas people will look up their favorite teams on Instagram. I can't tell you how many people are doing that with a brand, but I know for a fact they're going to media entities, they're going to ESPN, they're going to Barstool Sports, they're going to their favorite athlete and seeing what they're doing. So I think sports is unique in that way. And I think if that's something that excites you, sports is the way to go. But if you're someone that enjoys strategy and marketing, the brand side option might be great as well. So that's definitely one of the things to consider, having been on both sides. It's like sports is so this protected kind of idolized thing that people are interested in, which makes your job a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, people are wearing Raiders gear and Yankees gear. They're not necessarily wearing, Pepsi gear or, Sour Patch Kids shirts. It's
Exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely a different world.
Yeah, though I think brands are wishing they could be that way, but you can't create culture with brands.
No, for sure.
And in sports, so.
Yeah, and it's those moments like, you have the commercials and the activations and the things with brands that really stand out and are big to you, but it's like you remember the games, you remember the players, you remember the moments, and it's like it's already that inherently baked into kind of who you are and what you love, that it's like, oh, well, this is where I'm from, this is my team, so I need to follow along.